Welcome to the Bronx Book Festival. This is our first panel of the morning. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Melanie Brown. I am one of the co-directors for the adult panels and also a marketing director at Penguin Random House. And so our first panel of the day this morning is a publishing panel. So basically letting you guys know what publishing is, the people who work there, what it all encompasses. We basically have like a wide range of experience here on the stage. This is Latoya Smith, and we have Melanie, and we have Gisela, and we have Chantelle, but I actually want you guys to introduce yourself because your name, where you work, and I guess the first question could be like how you got into publishing, which could be long. It's long for me, so. But Latoya, let's start with you.
All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Latoya Smith. I am currently an agent, but I also work as a developmental editor and a ghostwriter. I've been in publishing now for 22 years. I own my own agency, LCS Literary Services, where I offer a ton of different editorial services as well as representation for authors. Let's see. I started actually while I was in college. I worked for Terry Woods, if a lot of you are familiar with her. She was one of the pioneers of street lit, urban fiction. I was her first assistant. That's how I got into publishing. So I worked with her through college, and then after I left her, I became an editor at Kensington and moved right on up through Grand Central, Sam Hain Publishing, and then now on my own. Did I answer all the questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
There'll be more.
So thanks for having me.
Yeah.
There we go. Hi, good morning. Let's untangle that. My name is Melanie Iglesias Perez. I'm a senior editor at Atria Books. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, so I actually had my first publishing internship at a little mom and pop publisher that doesn't exist anymore called Terranova Editores back there. And then when I tried to move into the New York scene, they saw the Puerto Rico address and promptly ignored my resume. So I did the master's at NYU in publishing to kind of help me leap toward moving to New York and getting into book publishing. And I'm really grateful that a year into that master's, I got a summer internship at Simon & Schuster. And I've been working with Atria ever since. So I've been there since summer 2015. It'll be, how many years now? 8 years, I believe, this summer. So that's me.
Just lift up and out.
There you go. Sorry. Good morning. My name is Gisela Ramos Vega. I'm the Domestic Rights Director at St. Martin's Press, Macmillan. I got into publishing because I've always had a love for books, and my parents used to take me on the weekends to the public library, and we would spend hours there, and they would let us take out however many books we wanted. And so once I realized that I really loved reading and writing, and I didn't even realize that publishing was an actually viable option until later on. But in order to get a foot into the door into publishing was hard, because I've lived here my whole life. So even though I'm from here, it was still hard unless you had connections or you knew someone or you had experience. So in doing the research, I realized that I could apply to and attend the NYU Publishing Summer Internship Summer Program. And I applied to it, and I got accepted, and that's how I got, basically into the publishing industry, my foot into the door, and I applied as an assistant to Macmillan, and I got accepted. So I've been working at Macmillan for about 22 years now. And that's how I got in. And my main thing was like a passion for reading and writing, and that's what led me, drove me into the industry.
Hello, my name is Chantelle Walker. I am a senior marketing manager at Penguin Random House. How I got into publishing. In college, I double majored in business and women's studies, and I knew that, I didn't want kind of like the typical business career where I was like working overtime, couldn't get out the office. And I had an advertising internship at the local newspaper in Saratoga Springs, and I'm like, I don't want to do this either. Just like daily advertising sales. It was just a lot of pressure to bring in advertising funds, but it was still really eye-opening. So I literally just went home one day and was just thinking, like, what kind of internship? I knew I needed an internship. And it occurred to me, it's like, you like reading? Like, there has to be a whole field out there. Like, so I literally went to my bookcase and turned every book around and looked at the companies and went to their websites and applied for as many internships as possible. Had no idea this many publishers existed. And I actually got a marketing internship at Simon & Schuster. And that was kind of my entry into publishing. And I've been in publishing ever since, but I've been in all types of publishing. So I've been in trade books, I've been in academic, I've been in medical and clinical publishing, and I made my way back to trade publishing at Penguin Random House, which is where I really wanted to end up. So I'm happy with that return.
Awesome. So I just realized this because there's like this natural order for any writers and authors in the house. There's this natural order of how a writer, of the steps of a writer. So I actually kind of want to go through because you are literally number one. You're the start of where the author, you're the first author stop.
Yes.
So what I know.
That was not intentional.
It was not intentional. So what is kind of your position? So when a writer comes to you, what is your position? Then you can kind of get over to Melanie,
of
where
course.
she would be the next step in the process.
Yeah. Okay. So I know the main question I always get is, why do authors need agents? And I would suggest, if you have never been published before and you're not good at contracts, you should absolutely have an agent. And so my first step is basically, you would pitch me your project. I would have a look at it, and if I felt like it was something that I could sell to a publisher, we would work together to get it ready for pitching. And then the way you would query me, I query the publishers, and I get you a book deal.
So first question, for authors, should they have a full manuscript before they come to you?
That's a great question. So it depends on what you're writing. If you're already an established author and maybe you're looking to switch agents, oftentimes if you have a track record, you do not need a full manuscript. I could sell you on proposal. Or if you're a nonfiction author and you've already got an established platform, we would just work with a few sample chapters. But if you are a new author or you're changing from one genre to another, then yes, I would prefer you to have a full manuscript, because what I don't want to happen is you send me your partial and I love it, and then you're not done, and now you feel kind of rushed to finish it, and it might not be good quality, or maybe that was hot at the moment, and now by the time you're done, I'm looking for something different. So I always recommend you to have a full, especially if you write fiction and you're either a new author or you're switching from one genre to another, and it's not anything comparable where I could say, okay, I could speak to this work and pitch you based off that.
So you send your work to editors. Yeah. Melanie is that person. Yeah. She's like, I love this. Yes. I want to work with you.
Exactly.
Come to Simon & Schuster.
Yes. Yeah. And I negotiate terms, and then once I negotiate the best terms for my client and everybody signs, it goes on to, I pass the baton to the editor.
Yes. And so as an editor, I am constantly receiving submissions from different agents. And the great thing about having an agent, too, is they know who to send your project to. If it's a romance, these are the editors I'm sending it to. If it's nonfiction, self-help, these are the editors I'm sending it to. So they have already taken the guesswork out of which editor or which house imprint is right for you. And so I get really excited when I see a pitch that it just has all the buzzwords that speak to me in what I'm looking for in a book. And so, I will read. Most editors, we have an ed board meeting every week. And so we'll take the project to ed board if we're really excited about it and we want to get second reads, which is when the rest of the team, or as many of them as possible, read along with us to make sure that we're not blindly in love with something and there's something here that others love as well. And then after that, I would set up a call with the author through the agent to see if we connect. Do we gel well? Does my vision for how I see this being edited gel with your vision? Do we have the same ideas of where does this fit on the shelf? What are your comps? Who would you be in conversation with at a publishing event, kind of thing? And then the fun part starts, where I get to then also help with the developmental edit. And it's interesting, I've been receiving more, I do mostly fiction. So nonfiction, I would receive a proposal, but I've been receiving more proposals for fiction, which is fascinating to me because I always need to read the full in order to be able to get a good grasp of like, can this author follow through on what the promise of the first 50, 100 pages gave me? Can this author develop those relationships? Like, having the full helps my wheels turn to see, well, what does the author already have on the page? What do I think I can bring to the table to help them really flesh out what I feel is missing or what I feel needs work? And then from there, I would help, once we're done with our editing process, once we've acquired and we've edited the manuscript, I send it off to production for copy edits, for design, for typesetting, and all of that fun stuff. And I have to pitch it to the sales team. And it's the sales team's job to then get the book account's really excited about it.
But I do want to ask one clarification
Sure.
for comps.
Yes.
Because maybe writers and debut authors don't know. And of course, you walk in thinking, like, my book is unique.
Yes.
I'm the only, like,
Yes.
my idea is my idea.
Yes.
There's no book like me.
Yes.
So I wanted to kind of get a definition of comps so that writers kind of know what they're getting into.
So comps essentially are your colleagues in the marketplace. They're the ones who are writing books that are either similar to yours or you're updating whatever that genre was, like, oh, I'm the next Sally Rooney kind of thing. Or they're the ones that we're putting two of those books in conversation and saying, oh, if you loved that book and that book, this is the baby of those two. You're going to love this book. And so that is a shorthand for readers. It's your elevator pitch to tell them, you know, if you were really excited, if you really loved this other book, then my book is for you, even though you're not familiar with me, especially if it's a debut author. And the trouble there is, like, sometimes there isn't the perfect comp, especially for something new, especially for something that hasn't been published widely. And that's where I struggle sometimes as well, because I'm trying to publish those, like, new voices, those different perspectives. And then I'm like, okay, what can I finagle? What 2 or 3 comps can I say? It's this from this, and this from that, and this from this, to then present, this is what this book is, to the sales team, to marketing, to publicity, so that they can then pitch with a clear idea of what this book is. But then the problem there is too, like, for the sales team at least, they want what they call a sales comp. I'm looking at editorial comps. They want a sales comp. So if I'm comping you to Colleen Hoover, for example, they're going to be like, that's not realistic. She sold 1 million books. This book is a debut author with no track. It's not going to sell 1 million books. What is the sales comp? What can I tell Barnes & Noble and Target that as a debut author in this genre with these tropes, this is how it's going to do, so that they then purchase the right amount of copies for their stores?
And can I just add to that? So the agent side of things, we try to find the sales comps because that determines how you get paid. Because normally what would happen is they would use those comps to find out the sales potential of your book. And that's what they use to run numbers and run what's called a profit and loss statement. And then whatever number that spits out, that's how they determine your advance. So don't, like, skip over that step, because it's super important for what kind of advance you will get. It's really based off of that, you know, sales potential of the book. And like she said, it's kind of like, you know, what is your book most like, so that we know not only how to pitch you, but how to sell you, where it's going to be in the book, in the bookstores, and then also for me to know this is how much money we should expect from the publisher for this particular book.
And they should be they should be recent comps, because it's great that you love The Great Gatsby in high school, and I know people are still reading it today, but we cannot get a realistic sales track for your book comping it to The Great Gatsby. It should be recent books, one, to show that the market is interested in this book right now, and 2, to know that you've read your competition, you've read your colleagues, so that if we put you in conversation with that person at an event as well, you can speak to their book and they can speak to yours, kind of thing. It all works together.
I'm glad you said that, because if I see Gone Girl meets XX book, I'm going to lose it. Like,
Yes.
It's 20 years old. Okay, so the book is formed, it's written, it's the best it's going to be. Now I know Gisela and Chantelle, you kind of work in tandem, but we're going to go to Gisela first. Of, like, once you've read the book, it is ready to go out and be sold and be marketed and be publicized. What is your role for the writer next?
So I'm in the subrights department. A lot of people confuse that with the sales department. Sales, we do work in tandem, but they basically pitch to bigger accounts like Walmart or Barnes and Nobles and stuff like that, and BJ's. That all goes through retail, basically. But with the subrights department, what my department does, it's basically a meld of contracts, legal, and selling rights. So what we do is we exploit all formats of the book. So we'll sell and license rights to large print rights, which you'll basically see in like all the libraries that whenever you check out a large font of a book, that's large print rights. Audiobooks, which obviously everybody knows what audiobooks are. There's also we sell serial rights, which is parts of the book into a magazine, like an excerpts into a magazines or newspapers, any kind of publications, even online. We also sell book club rights. One of my biggest accounts is Book of the Month Club. So those titles that you see picked in Book of the Month Club in their subscription boxes are sold through me and through my department. We also sell translation rights all around the world, and we sell world English rights, around the UK. So we try to, apart from the sales department, we basically are one of the only departments that will try to get money that will then be divided between the publisher and the author. So we try to exploit every little format of the book and try to make, as much money as we can for the author.
And Chantelle, so subrights is done, the editing is done. I know in marketing, it's kind of like it is very early. So you're working with the author at least a year, sometimes 6 months to a year before the book actually goes on sale. So what is your role for the author? Because I feel like this is kind of like the last steps is like the publicity and the marketing portion of it.
Yeah, so I would say on the marketing side, my role is to really help editorial fine-tuned positioning. So, we're looking at, all right, who is the reader for this book? Like, a lot of times editorial will come with an idea of a reader, and then, we'll put out some early feelers and get some early reads and see how the market is really appreciating that book. And then from there, we'll develop a marketing campaign to really get the book out there. I think marketing is really difficult because it's really hard to measure success at times. Publicity is kind of, all right, they were on Good Morning America. We've seen the sales jump. It's kind of like one-to-one correlation. But when it comes to marketing, we just don't know outside of like maybe social media advertising. You can see some clicks, but did that convert? We do a podcast ad. Did that convert? We just don't know. So a lot of it is just creating general awareness and getting people aware of it. So really working closely with authors, if they have a social media presence, helping them develop a plan to kind of really put the book out there. I would say the hardest thing is working with authors who don't have a social media presence, because I work mainly with nonfiction books. So, you need more, with fiction, it's like, all right, you have a great read. You can kind of convince someone off of a great read. When it's nonfiction, you kind of need a little bit more than just the read. You need them to have a platform. Some of our most successful authors are authors who have already cultivated a following, already cultivated a platform. So when we have like first time and debut authors who don't have that, it's a little harder to break in. With COVID and quarantine and everything, people are looking for escapism. So nonfiction can be really difficult, and kind of explaining that and managing expectations for nonfiction authors is probably the biggest challenge, I would say. But yeah, I work really closely. There's a lot of social media work. There's a lot of, fine-tuning copy, in terms of like how we're presenting this book to the public, finding kind of niche interest groups, book clubs, Facebook groups, Goodreads, just really looking at any and every way to reach new readers.
Awesome. And so that's kind of like the natural order of book publishing, which is hilarious because I didn't even know that this was going to happen. But one more question before we kind of, in case anyone in the audience has questions, I'll actually start with you, Chantelle. Like, what's the best and challenging? So these could be the same, or these could be two different questions. The best and challenging part of your job.
I would say the best part of the job is really working with authors who are really receptive. I think that what can be a challenge working with debut and sometimes recurring authors is they have an idea of how it's supposed to go. They have friends who've published books. They have this, they kind of have an idea of, my friend said I should be getting a book release party and a launch party. And I'm like, that's old publishing. We don't do that anymore. So managing kind of the expectations of debut authors and understanding that the book climate has changed. Like it really has changed, and letting them know that every book is not going to make the New York Times bestseller list. And I think having those conversations really early about their expectations has been really helpful. I think in the beginning we used to kind of have our big marketing meeting and kind of go through our plans, but what has really helped is like letting the author talk about their expectations earlier in the conversation will help alleviate a lot of disappointment later. So that's just kind of been a challenging and a learning curve as we go on. And then I would say the best part of the job is just kind of seeing everything you put into a book kind of come to fruition. So you're kind of seeing people pick up on it on social media. You're seeing it hit bestseller lists. You're seeing all your hard work kind of mean something. Can really be the best part of the job.
Gisela, same question for you.
It's sort of similar. A lot of the best part of what I do and is that I get to do a whole bunch of different things daily. I can either start working on contracts, I could be negotiating deals, I could be pitching books to different accounts. But the best part about doing that is that I get to read a whole bunch of different books across all genres, from like science fiction, women's fiction, horror, thrillers. Like I love being able to like pitch all different kinds of genres of the books, and then being able to be proud of like the job that I have done. Getting a book into the Book of the Month Club can sometimes, not always, because I don't want to put that out there, but sometimes it will help push a book into the New York Times bestseller list. So then when it does hit the list, I'm like so proud. I'm like, that's a big part of why it's there is because of my job and what I've been doing, you know? Another part is like being able to see when I was doing a lot of serial stuff in the beginning of my career, I sold a book that had just come in from a Latinx author into Latina magazine, and seeing that article placed into that magazine because of something that I did. It was just so proud, like a very proud moment that I was able to share with my parents and things like that. So being able to like, you know, just represent the author and represent my company in that manner, like I love doing that. And just the baseline of being able to read a whole bunch of different genres, which I always love doing anyways, and getting paid for it, like that's the best part of my job, you know? And then the challenging part, I guess, is a little bit of what she had said, is like managing expectations. Because sometimes no matter how much I push or try to get something sold to, like, you know, either the large print people or the Book of the Month Club and stuff like that, it won't sell, or they won't pick it up no matter how much I love, like, I champion that book. If it doesn't sell, like, it doesn't sell. And, like, just so being able to manage the author's expectations for that, and even to a certain extent, my company's expectation. But otherwise, like, for me, the positive far outweighs the negative, so.
Yeah, for me, similar to Chantelle, like the best part, aside from like I do love the developmental edit, like I love connecting with the author in that way and like really digging into a manuscript. But aside from that, it's seeing all of that come to fruition after publication, like the Goodreads reviews, Storygraph, wherever they seem to be, like TikToks where people are sobbing over the book that you worked on for so long, because the author's been writing this book for however long, sometimes years. Like the author and I were then working on it for maybe another year. And then once our job is done, it's like, okay, now I wait for marketing and publicity. And then, okay, now it's gonna come out. And the book is out, and it's like, what do you do with yourself? And it's just wonderful to see like the reviews and the reactions come through, and like especially if it's a heart book. Like for me, it was The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina by Zoraida Cordova. I was so happy when it did get Book of the Month, and when like it's done so much better in paperback, and like it did well in hardcover, but it's so much better in paperback. And just seeing that continue to grow and the love for it continue to come in, it's just, that is the biggest, the best part. And then the hard part, aside from managing expectations, like managing my own too, because I acquired this book because I loved it, because I saw something in this author, and I want to grow them book over book to, like, maybe if the first one's not a New York Times bestseller, maybe the second or third one will be. And the first one needs to do well enough for that to happen, for that to continue. And if the readers aren't receiving it, or the media's not receiving it the way that I hoped they would, I do get a little disappointed along with the author. Like, it's our mutual baby now. I've been in this with you. So that's definitely one of the harder parts. And of course, I'm at SNS. It's a big five. We're publishing a lot of books every season, not just per imprint, but the company as well. So fighting to get the most attention possible for the book that I'm pushing out is also one of the hardest parts of the job, because everyone in the company has their own priorities, and this one's mine. So
So for clarity, Atria Books publishes what, 170 a year? Oh,
maybe more.
maybe when I was there.
Maybe
So
we have more acquiring editors now.
So let's say 200 books a year.
Yeah.
And that's just one imprint. And there's big five publishers with hundreds of imprints.
Yeah.
So I'm like, that's the kind of world you have to weed through as a writer and author just to make, like, it's a lot of work.
It's a lot. Yeah.
And a lot of anxiety, but good anxiety.
Anxiety.
Good anxiety.
It's worth it when it pans out.
And Latoya, what about you?
I would say the best part of my job is kind of feeling like I can make someone's dreams come true. Having worked with the authors and getting things ready and then getting that deal, like they get so excited. But then even more like when the author and editor connect and we just have continuing contracts where I don't have to do any work is wonderful. And then also, when you have something like that will take off. So like one of my debut authors is, her name is Crystal Smith Paul, and she wrote a book called Did You Hear About Kitty Carr? And it's like taken off, and this I found in the slush. It was not something I requested. It's doing amazing things. It's a Reese Witherspoon book club pick. I'm getting TV film interest, and this is her first novel. So like to experience that with her and know it's possible, like other people, like she was saying, love things as much as you. There's nothing like that feeling. But then the worst part of my job is you have that feeling about a project, you've edited it to death, you've pitched it to death, and nobody wants it. And so now the authors start to feel self-conscious. Am I good enough? Some of them don't have other projects. And then sometimes we have to part ways. And that's like really tough because, as an agent, I only get paid if I sell the book. So any work I'm doing with the author is kind of free work until I sell the book. And so sometimes, you have to put a cap on that and say, all right, I've done everything I can do. Maybe another agent might be better suited for you. And, I try not to make it personal, but of course you've built a relationship with that author. So anytime you part ways, it's hard, but sometimes it happens. So that's probably the toughest part of the job is when, a book, you cannot sell a book, and then you have to have that tough conversation of now what do we do?
But the best part of it is like a lot of the big writers, bestsellers, million copy bestsellers, have had rejections. Like they've had agent rejections, they've had editor rejections, they may have to go to 10, 20, 30, 40 people before someone loves the book. So the rejection is not the end of the world. And one more question for clarity is the slush pile.
Okay, so most publishers and agents have like a generic submission policy where anybody can just send your stuff. And so oftentimes when we come to places like this or conferences, you meet authors and you request books. Or as an agent, and I know I had to do this as an editor too, you find authors and then you approach them because they've already established a platform either as a nonfiction person or as an author, maybe self-published, and your book did really well, and so I come after you. But then that generic inbox that just gets any and everything, some people kind of poo-poo that, and they, I know editors who will not even look at slush. If they did not request it or it did not come from an agent, they will not look at it. And one of the editors that I worked under, Karen Thomas, she discovered Carl Weber in the slush. You know what I'm saying? And, Carl now has a number of best-selling books. He has The Family Business on BET. So you can find gems in that generic inbox, that slush pile. So I was always taught to look at everything. Like, don't just, nix someone because they don't have an in, because they could be the next big thing. And that was Crystal. She just pitched me, and I loved her book. And now, it's doing amazing things. So that's the slush.
Thank you. Now we're going to go to the audience. Anyone have questions? Please, yes.
New adults. I would say I'm trying to publish more in the new adult space. So I would say roughly the same word count as a rom-com. You don't want it to be a fantasy length honker. I know that a lot of self-published books tend to be a lot longer in the romance category and new adult category because I think I heard somewhere they get paid by the page swipe or word. Please don't. Yeah, I think like I'm thinking in terms of the published book, like 250, 300 pages at most. So that would be what, like maybe 90,000 words less?
I don't even know if you would want to make it that long.
No.
I would say probably 60 to 70K because you have that sort of young adult audience and their books tend to be shorter unless, like she said, it's like sci-fi fantasy or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's like the 50 and 60K. So you don't want to I wouldn't go too far past 60,000 words.
Don't go too far past.
She might make it 90. Or you come to her for 90, she'll make it 60.
I'm just thinking of the submissions I've received recently, and so many are 90,000 words or higher, and I'm like, how do I shorten this?
Right, yeah.
Because like I don't want to curb you if like the gem of the story ends up on the cutting room floor and I didn't see it, you know. But yes, try to keep it on the shorter end. And for me, honestly, pacing is more important. Get your pacing down because even 60,000 words can feel like 200,000 if you don't have your pacing down right. And for new adult, same as YA, it needs to be like, I feel like new adult has a little more space for introspection on the page, but like it needs to be a little faster. You want it to be that beach read, that fun read that just lets you disconnect from your real life for a little bit.
Right. Because you're battling with social media and like other more tangible mediums, so you want to keep that reader's attention because they're kind of just moving into adulthood. So
Right.
So we're gonna go to you, then this little guy.
I would say first thing is to get some kind of critique partner or beta reader outside of your family. We love family and friends. They're great, but sometimes they will lie because they don't want to hurt your feelings. So I would say if you can get that book as clean as possible, if you can afford an editor, get one because we look at hundreds of submissions. So you want to make sure that when you have the eye of an agent or an editor, your material is solid. That's the first step. And then also knowing the audience is nice because when you do pitch one of us, you want to make sure you know who you're pitching the book for, and that, like she was saying, you know your audience. Because when you query me, you're gonna have to have that stuff in your pitch. And again, it goes down the line. Like I use it to pitch her, she uses it to pitch sales. So those are like the two big things: making sure your material is solid and that you have a good knowledge of the audience and the market.
And knowing the audience, too, helps you narrow down which agents you want to query, because not every agent does every genre. I'm jealous that agents can do a little bit of everything, like whatever their heart desires. I have to be a little more narrow. But they do have, each of them has their rules of like, this is how much on the excerpt I want to be queried. These are the genres I want to be queried in. So knowing your audience, I think, is first and foremost, and then getting your work solid.
Well, I think you're kind of doing it, like coming to stuff like this and meeting people and talking to people, talking to other authors and getting like their, information. And also I think, yes, it is a craft, like an art sort of career, but it is a business. And so I think understanding the business side of it as much as possible will let you know, do I even want to put forth this effort? Because I think people think the hardest part is writing the book. That is the easiest part of it. The harder part is getting it to publication level, marketing it. I mean, so many books come out and you don't want to, and also having a budget. I think people don't recognize you need a budget in addition to the publisher's budget. So I think just learning everything you can and then deciding, is this something I really want to get into? Do I want to, keep it under my bed? Like, I think the more knowledge you have, the more it'll help you to decide what's for you.
And I think there's so many more resources now for that too, of authors who are trying to demystify the business side of publishing. So like I would highly recommend, not to plug Zoraida again, but Zoraida and Donnell Clayton have a podcast called Deadline City where they talk about that. Zoraida has published middle grade, YA, licensed books, now adult with me, romance under a pen name. So she can give you through that podcast like a little overview of like this is how they do in kids, this is how they do in adults, like because there are differences in both. And same with like resources like Jane Friedman, I feel is really good. I always direct people there for nonfiction. Like if you want to figure out, is your nonfiction idea really book worthy or is it a magazine article? Like there are certain questions you should be asking yourself. So yeah, I think there's so many resources now online that can help you.
And there's also a lot of Facebook author groups that you can join in and like hear what people are talking about and get, help that way too.
Young man, can you shout? Do you need the microphone? You're loud. Oh, good question. Good question. Actually, Chantelle, do you have a good like book that you've marketed that's been like super successful?
I have to think on that one. There's been a few, but I'm trying to think like what was the most. I'll come back to you.
You stumped the panel here. Good job.
Actually, I'll answer that. In probably midway of my career being an associate, I was asked to I volunteered to work on a book, a YA book by PC Cast, and at that point YA was not a big boom at all. That hadn't happened yet. So a lot of people weren't really doing a lot of kind of like. They hadn't been submitting a lot of YA stuff. So then I was like, give it to me and I'll try to submit it to a whole bunch of different, publishers and a whole bunch of different accounts and let's see if we can make it, sell at least some kind of rights to it, right? And right when I was doing that and my manager let me do it, she's like, sure, great. Nobody, YA is not hot right now. Go ahead and do it. I sold. The big YA thing simultaneously happened, and I sold marked by PC Cast and Kristen Cast to like basically 65 countries around the world, and sold over like 40 different translations, and it just really exploded. And that wasn't something I had been expecting because YA wasn't a big thing back then. But right when it happened, and right when I started selling, is when a big YA explosion happened. And I know at that time my manager was just kind of like, what the heck? Because she had just given basically like someone new, a newbie, like, the chance to work on it. But I love that. That came out of nowhere. And that gave me a passion to try to like sell stuff even more and like, and get a lot of deals for our authors and for our publishing house. But that was like one of the biggest books that I worked on because it sold all over the world and in every country and in every translation that you could think of. And it was amazing. And it was like a big bestseller. And then she went on to write like 6 or 7 more books than she should have for that series. But but it did really well.
Okay, I have an answer. I would say the most successful book I worked on was The Light We Carry by Michelle Obama.
Yeah.
So on one hand, it's like, oh, you expect it. But then on the other hand, it's not a memoir. It's more self-help. It was a little more woo-woo. So we had to like really position her in a way and really prep the sales team like, this is not a becoming comp. Like, so, on one hand, plenty of people are going to buy it because it's Michelle Obama. But then on the other hand, people are like, what? The Light We Carry? What does this mean? Why should I buy it? So we definitely still had our work cut out for us. And it published last November, and it's still on the New York Times bestseller list. So we're just been really, really happy with its success. And, it had a huge advertising budget, but this was definitely one where the messaging just kept coming up. We had to keep tweaking it and help people understand what it was really about. So that was probably the most successful book I worked on.
I would say the book I mentioned, Did You Hear About Kitty Carr? Because like I said, it was a debut. Even though the publishers were excited about it, I mean, as we know, that happens often and sometimes it doesn't translate. So that's one. And then 2 quick mentions of just authors that I was their first editor and now their careers have taken off. Kennedy Ryan is one. I was her first editor, and Dee Watkins is another. He's written a number of nonfiction books, and now he writes for HBO. So I would say those were like 2 authors that I just loved, and I mean, their careers have just taken off, and it's really exciting to see.
Yeah. So like Michelle Obama, my category killer would be Colleen Hoover.
That's
It Starts With Us, published last October. Instant #1, worldwide #1. all those things. So it's like, it was expected, but also we were all holding our breath to make sure it did happen. Because if it hadn't, that would have been very bad. But then like after that, I feel like I define success in different ways. Like some books are commercial hits, some books are like literary, like prestige hits. And so like The Boy with a Bird in His Chest by M. Lund, this gorgeous literary novel is, you know, it was nominated for 2 awards. It was longlisted for one and shortlisted for the other. And that got a great buzz for the book. And then Greedy, which is one of my nonfiction titles, Notes from a Bisexual Who Wants Too Much by Jen Winston, was also nominated for 2 different awards. I think more. I'm sorry, Jen. And so that one also just continues to sell week over week. Like, it didn't hit the list, neither of them. But they're perennial sellers in the sense that we're seeing a decent chunk of sales every week, and it keeps going and going. We call that a good backlister. And then I think, honestly, my most successful is The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina by Zoraida Cordova. And, Book of the Month did a great job of exposure for the book. We sold, I think it was 27,000 copies through Book of the Month. And the heartbreaking thing about that is that we only sold week 1, I think it was like 1,000 something. And then week 2 was 3,000 something. But because week 1 was only 1,000 at retail, the Book of the Month didn't lift it onto the list. And that was the biggest heartbreak, because I wanted to give Zoraida her first New York Times bestseller title because she so deserves it. But then now in paperback, it's just, it has sold so many copies. Like, book clubs keep picking it up. Readers keep whenever there's a roundup of like books that I'm reading for, of course, Hispanic Heritage Month, she's on there. If they're talking about Ecuadorian authors, she's on there. If they're talking about magical realism, she's on there. People are constantly recommending it to folks. And I think that word of mouth will always be the biggest seller of books. So I think that one, even though it doesn't have the New York Times bestseller label, that is, I think, my most successful book outside of Colleen.
We have one more question that I hope can be answered quickly. But before I do, I just want to make a couple announcements that 11:30 will be the next panel. It would be Christine Pride and Joe Piazza. They are 2 authors, 1 book. So there are 2 authors that are actually authoring 1 book. They have their second book. And then after this panel, we have a book giveaway. So if anyone wants to grab a book. But you, yes, young lady?
Do your research. That I've been surprised in how many folks come into the interview not knowing the imprint, what we work on, not knowing the editor they're talking to, what books they work on. Do your research for sure, because then it shows that you're not interested in just getting a foot in the door, but you're interested in this position with this company at this time. And I say, in addition to that, it's knowing, similar to authors having to know their audience, you need to know what your interests are. So as an assistant, at least in editorial, at first, you need to cater to your boss's interests, but eventually you're going to start building your own list. It helps if your interests dovetail with theirs, but you don't have to match them. But you do need to, I would say, be well-read, because you need to know the recent comps. You need to help us know what are the recent comps for what's coming in, what are folks reading, what are folks excited about right now. And a little trick, because it's hard to read everything, a little trick that one of my mentors taught me was if a book is getting really buzzy, but it's not really your wheelhouse, but you want to see what it's about, get the Kindle sample and dip in. See what the book's about just from that Kindle sample, and then if you're really excited about it, go check it out from the library or buy a copy. But that's also a way to dip your toe in the books you think you want to work on and hone what you actually want to work on, so that when you're in that interview trying to get into a publishing house, regardless of department, they know, oh, this person is actually interested in books, interested in working in this way with books, not just in editorial, because I feel like everyone hears about editorial and forgets about the other departments.
And to add to that, there's 2 places that you should be subscribing to for anyone who is actually here interested in jobs in publishing. The first one is shelfawareness.com, and the other is Publishers Lunch. Those are the 2 top publishing kind of newsletters that you should be subscribing to, and they list jobs every single day in a variety of places.
And I would also say find the plug, aka meet people and network, because word of mouth in-house will get you far. So if you can do an internship, or if you meet any staff members that work at a publisher, if I know you personally, like I can always put in a good word. I mean, we want to pretend like nepotism doesn't exist, but it does. So if you have an in with anyone or network with anyone, either through LinkedIn, Facebook, conferences, book festivals, like that's even better to kind of know someone who can put you in, or get an internship somewhere, even if it's at a literary agency. I mean, they're plugged in with publishers. So I've seen, like, even I've had interns that then, became publicists, et cetera, at Penguin Random House and other publishers because of their experience with an agency, even if you're, trying to get into a publishing house, and vice versa.
I mean, this was an amazing discussion. I'm like we're so out of time. And, we're about to be kicked off the stage. But thank you all for coming. Thank you all for listening. Thank you to our panelists. They're successful in so different ways, and so like these are kind of like the people that you should be networking with all the time. But thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me.
Y'all.
Thank you, guys.
Everybody.